Hey, I'm Bobby G, the author of the forthcoming book, Build Your Brand Like You Give a Shit. And the worst advice I've ever heard is fake it till you make it.
I love that that's worst advice. Who gave you that crappy advice, Bobby?
Everybody,
Everybody. Like when, man? Like second grade or, when you started your business
dude,
or when did that happen, brother?
it's like the advice everyone gives you when you're starting out, right? Like when you're starting out at any point in your career, whether it's your first job, it's your first leadership role, it's your first company, it's always like, oh yeah, fake it till you make it. And that is just terrible advice. Why is it terrible advice? Because you're bullshitting people. So why would you start any relationship with anybody built on bullshit?
Yeah. No, I feel you, man. I totally understand that. But I think I don't know, man. Do you think people actually like fake it, or do you think they don't know who the hell they are when they start out?
Oh, that's a really interesting perspective. Well, I think the faking it is you're fronting, right? So, for I'll tell a story. When I started the company, the first few months, the big agencies in town in Baltimore reached out to me. They wanted to know what I was doing. They also wanted to pick my brain about what I used to be doing to see if they can get any, inside info. But one of them asked, I started doing some design work for them. They asked me if I ever designed an iOS app. And if you fake it till you make it, you say, "Of course I have. Yeah, awesome. Of course, right?" But I said no. But I can't wait to learn. So what happened was I was at this crossroads, and if I bullshitted them and said yes, I would have got the work. But what would have happened? They wouldn't have given me the support they ended up giving me to help me and ensure that I was successful. But instead, I was honest with them, and I said, I don't know, but I can't wait to learn. I was designing interfaces at that point for 14 years. So I know how to do that, but I just didn't know the nuances of an app. So they said, great, job's yours. We'll hook you up with so and so. He's the lead dev on iOS. He's going to make sure you know what to touch, what to leave alone, and give you all the documentations on best practices. So I was super successful with it. They were super successful with it. And if I faked it and said, yeah, of course I did, I would have been on an island. I would have been frustrated. I would have struggled. They would have been frustrated. And that would have been that, right? They wouldn't have been happy. And I would have wasted a
Yeah.
lot of time. And my reputation would have suffered because of it, right? And it happens all the time. Like, just, be sell. It's not the best analogy, and my team tells me to stop using it. But someone advised me one time and said, sell cake to fat kids, right? Sell people what they want, not what they need. I haven't talked to that dude since. That's just terrible advice as well. It's just basically give people what they want, whether they need it or or even truly want it, right? And it's just there's nothing real about that, and it's just bad advice.
Yeah. Yeah, those are awful, man. That's so awful. So, especially in the agency world where there's a million things you could do, and the more you specialize, I think the more opportunity you have to really shine and partner
Yeah.
to make things work, right?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for someone being a true expert at something, whether it's a vertical or horizontal. If you have great expertise there, the analogy that people always use is, if you got a heart problem, do you go to a general practitioner or do you go to the best heart surgeon in the country? I know what I would choose, right? But there's a positioning, especially with agencies. There's a lack of an ability to commit to positioning. Lots of agency websites I see out there, and even ones I've designed, not a proper though, are have this laundry list of services. It's basically everything an agency could possibly do. And I think the purpose of that is to be able to sell as much as possible, whether you can deliver on it or not. And kick the fat kids, right? And but the opposite is like, hey, we're a B2B tech brand, or we're a nonprofit selling tickets to a museum, right? So like having expertise in that and say, oh yeah, we know that, we've done that before. Here's some challenges you're going to experience once we get through the initial pain, the pain points. So you're bringing a lot of value because you're a subject matter expert. You're an expert practitioner, not just someone who knows a little bit about everything. Of course, it's good to be well-rounded, right? There's definitely to be a generalist. There is some benefit to that, but without a generalist, without any key expertise, I find that hard to find a real demand for your work that isn't generally commoditized, right? That best heart surgeon in the country, was probably driving a Porsche, and that general practitioner is probably driving a Honda Accord. Nothing wrong with either, but you think about your pricing around your positioning and your expertise. It's, of course, being a generalist, you won't make as much as a specialist as long as there's demand.
Yeah, right. So let's talk more about that, because I think that's where your book kind of comes in, man. The whole, build your brand like you give a shit, at least as I read it, right, is all about like pick and own that niche, pick and own that, right, and be there and really be that expert. So let's start with what the heck a brand even is to you, Bobby. How do you define a brand?
We like to say your brand is your reputation, right? So you're going to earn the reputation you deserve, not necessarily the one you want. So when you think about things like our website has the wrong message, or it's dated, or our identity's wrong, or we don't have any core messaging, then all these things, are they really helping, or are they hurting your business? And if nothing's consistent and nothing's right, well, they're absolutely hurting your business, right? And business leaders feel that in their gut, but they don't really understand what's going on. They don't get the problem. And that's okay, because they're experts at what they do, right? They're leading their company. Great. But when, they're like, well, all these symptoms, what are these symptoms? What's the cause of these symptoms? And that's where we really want to come in and help and say, okay, yeah, sure, the messaging's off, or you've plateaued, or sales are down, or competition's creeping, or people, which is really common, people know your services as your brand, not who your brand is, right? Because people start naming everything, different stuff, and just creating all this brand confusion. It's like, well, how does anybody know who we are when they think about it as our product, this product, or this service, or that product, right? So it's really just simplifying things down to say, like, really at the core, like, what do you want to be known as? What do you want to be known for? What's really important to you? And really focusing your brand around that, and using that as sort of the energy center for everything you're doing. So, like, is your messaging right? It might be saying the right thing, but is it in the right tone of voice? Like, well, not really. We do this for our clients, but I needed a facilitator to help me do it for my company, right? And we just went through it. We're saying the right thing, but it wasn't in the right tone of voice. And that's what he helped us do, kind of spin it in a way that is more us, right? So we want to control that reputation. We want to earn it every day. We want to help our customers earn it every day. And having the right tools and the right things in place to ensure when people are landing on that website, or seeing your message, or seeing your marketing, or being approached by one of your people, like, they're interpreting that message, that brand, in a way that's aligned and consistent with what the reputation we want to earn, right? And when you think about when you have a good reputation or a bad reputation, people are going to talk about it, right? So what's worse than having a bad reputation is having no reputation. So when you have no rep, then what are people talking about? Well, they're not talking about you.
So, okay, so and I hear that, right? And I understand that, and that makes a lot of sense. But how do we even start that, man? How do we like, okay, we just opened a new company. Or let's, but obviously we've got work in the past. Like, where do we start, man? How do we start building that reputation? How do we start building that brand so that we can say that without faking it until you make it?
I would suggest start with your values and purpose. So your values and purpose are the non-negotiable aspects of your business. So whether you start, a business A and shut it down or sell it and start business B, pretty sure that your values and purpose are going to be pretty consistent, right? Like one might be a service, one might be a product. So the purpose might be a little bit, pivot a little bit, but your values aren't going to change. Non-negotiable, right? So it's really, what do you give a shit about? Like, what are you willing to fight for? What won't you take? What do you want to ensure at every turn of the company, right? How do the people get treated? How do you treat other people? How does your work and your company impact the community, the environment, your customers? What are you trying to leave your customers with? Are you trying to empower them? Are you trying to educate them? Like, what is the purpose? What is the outcome that you're seeking? What fulfills you about being a part of that brand? Like, what do you feel in your gut? Like energy from delivering what to your customers, your clients, whatever, right? So that's the starting point for building that rock solid brand foundation. There's two other pieces to it. One's your core message, right? So what's the takeaway you want people to get when they engage with your brand? What do you want your employees to say, your leaders to say, your customers to say, the community to say about your brand, right? It doesn't have to be like a memorization of a slogan or tagline. Like, none of that really matters. But what's the takeaway? What's that message they want to feel? Seth Godin says, I have his book here on my desk. Everything is marketing. This is marketing. It's the book, but he says everything is marketing. And I agree, but I don't stop there. Everything is marketing because everything sends a message. But how that message is interpreted, how it makes people feel, that's your brand, because it's your reputation. So that's what the message should be. Like, oh, this feels good, right? This is engaging. I got value out of this, right? And that's what we want to align our brand with, and the message that our brand sends. The last piece, which I was just talking about, is your tone of voice, your personality. So, a great exercise that listeners can go and do on their own is, imagine a famous person, real, fiction, whatever, and that person is the personification of your brand. So I wrote a blog last year called "Is Your Brand Hulk Hogan or Harrison Ford?" And thinking of the difference between those two characters, those two people, right, is night and day. So is your brand the Hulkster, or is it Harrison? Well, it's more Harrison than Hulkster. Okay, but it's not quite Harrison. Okay, well, then keep moving and saying, is it this person or is it that person? Is it this person or is it that person? Until you get it to be where it's like, that feels right. That feels real good. That's our brand, right? It's Tom Cruise. Perfect, right? So when you close your eyes and you're reading, you're repeating your messaging on your website, your marketing messaging, your sales messaging, and you're hearing it in Tom Cruise's voice, right? Like, yeah, you've seen Tom Cruise saying it. Yeah, that feels right. That feels right. So that's a way to be consistent and put personality into your brand, no matter who's creating the content, whether it's design or writing. Those things are going to be consistent because it's conveying a personality that is very tangible to people.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I've never heard anyone break down brand voice quite like that. The imagining a famous person as the personification of your brand. That's really interesting, man. I got to find that article because Hulk Hogan or Harrison Ford, very different emotions, very different vibes, right? Very different, even attributes, right? I think that's super interesting, man. That's so. Where would you, for you, Bobby, are you, who are you? Like, who's your brand? Are you Hulk Hogan or Harrison Ford, or where the heck are you, man? Where do you fall in that?
So the personification of proper is Anthony Bourdain. So why Anthony Bourdain? Well, one, he was real, right? Like, he was flawed. So we're reminded all the time that it's okay that we're human. It's okay that we're not perfect. Nobody is, right? It's okay that we're all kind of damaged goods in our own right. And that kind of, owning that stuff kind of builds our own individualism, right? But in terms of the personification, he was a real dude. He was an expert at what he did, but he's not known as a chef. He's known as a storyteller. He's known as a person that went around the world and had relationships and experiences with people. And that's what's really important to us, right? It's the value of our work is only kind of measured in the results we provide. And the results we provide is through, building that value delivers a relationship. Relationship is derivative from results. So results give you the results of the relationship. And we want to earn that with our clients. We want to tell the right story. We want to tell that real story. We want to make authentic connections with their customers and their prospects so they can have real conversations. So there's no faking it till you make it. There's no gimmicks. There's no hacks. None of that's important to us. There's plenty of companies out there that rely on, a clever slogan or a clever tagline. And that's House of Cards stuff, right? That's not real. That's not scalable. That's just one gimmick after another. And you might get lucky off it, right? We've seen some brands get lucky off a gimmick, right? But then they're spending the rest of their career trying to find the next, piece of shit that sticks to the wall. But who wants to play in shit, right? Well, let's play with stuff that's real and tangible and honest. And that's the authenticity that we really want to seek and encourage our clients to encourage everybody out there when they're building a brand, is like, do it like you give a shit, right? Like, if you really cared about something, doing it the right way, that you wouldn't even entertain a gimmick or a hack or any of that stuff.
Yeah, unless you're a gimmicky hack yourself, right? In which case, that's probably aligned.
If that's the rep you want, you're going to earn it.
There we go. So cool. So, hey, man, so I have to say, Bobby, your book was fascinating because there's a lot of stuff in there that isn't traditionally brand relevant, right? So I'm reading this. I'm like, that's really interesting, right? That's a different way to look at that. One of the things that you talked about was the concept of enough. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think that one is super important, man. The concept of enough and how that relates to our brand and how we can use that to brand like we give a shit.
Well, it's a book on branding that doesn't about design, right?
Yeah.
It's unique in that way, even though I've been a designer my whole career. So what's enough, right? So, we look around and who's celebrated in the business world. It's the people who amass an insane amount, not healthy amount of wealth. The guy who was, I should have done my homework. The guy who was Reagan back in the day named the entrepreneur of the century was, I think,
Lee Iacocca.
No, it wasn't Lee Iacocca. It was maybe the guy at Westinghouse. I can't recall, but Google can tell us. But he named him entrepreneur, CEO of the century, because what he did was gutted the pension plans and destroyed them with the corporation, laid everybody off, and outsourced everything to other countries for cheap labor.
Was that Jack Welch?
Look at Jack Welch. Yep. And that's the CEO of the century, right? Like, just totally ruining everybody's lives who contributed to the success of that company. I have a different opinion of that. But we still see it today, right? That's the business climate today, where, the guys who are amassing and hoarding this massive amount of wealth are called great men and women. But, hoarding is still hoarding. There was a show on TV back before I cut the cable called Hoarders. And basically it was a carnival sideshow of people who were very ill, hoarding, newspapers and junk and this and that. And they were put on display for our entertainment. We laughed at them. But I look at, the Bezoses and Buffetts and all of that ilk the same way. Like they're disturbed people. And, there's a price to pay for the pursuit of infinite growth and unlimited wealth. That price is paid not by the people hoarding the money, but by the rest of society, the rest of the world, the environment. And, there's no shortage of desire to take advantage of that system, lie and steal and PR their way to immense wealth. So when we think about being an entrepreneur or leader of a company, what are we here to do, right? Are we here to take advantage and of everybody and everything possible to line our own pockets? That's just like a shitty, toxic way to live. Because we think about how nature truly works, right? It's balance. I was a science major for 3 years of college, and I was really good at science, but I just didn't love it as much as design, so I switched it up. But balancing equations is what chemistry is, and balance in nature is how it thrives. When things are imbalanced, right? There's some sort of destruction that's going to occur. Even when you think about dogs, right? I have dogs. I love dogs. Like in nature, when if there's a pack of wolves and one of them is acting nuts, they try to correct it or kick it out, remove it, or kill it, right? Because it puts the pack, the community in danger to have that imbalance, right? Symbiotic means you give and take what you need. But when someone's just taking and giving very little in return, that's imbalance. And that should also be destroyed. But instead, we're celebrating it. And we're told, and that goes back to like fake it till you make it, right? Like the business world says, you need to have 1,000 employees and $100 million a year to be successful. That's not true. But that's what we're told, some arbitrary number like that, or, lie and fake it till you make it, right? Like, again, like that's deceiving. That's not real. And one of the motivators for me to start my own company was I'm just sick and tired of how that's the norm. I hedged my bets, said like, hey, we can work in our client's best interests. We can work in my best interest, my family's best interest, where I have balance and the company is providing for us, and my employees' best interest, where I'm providing for them and also giving them what I want out of my career is balance and fulfillment and accomplishment and reward, right? Like we can do that. Like that's possible. It doesn't have to be, 2 or 3 people get rich while everyone gets ruined. So when you have to ask yourself, like, what's enough, right? And when I think about what's enough, like, it doesn't mean like live a meager life in a tiny house and, a lot of stuff. Like, I don't want that, right? But think about what you truly want and then keep thinking, right? If I grew proper to $100 million company, right, what's the cost of that? Right. Well, as long as everybody is in their sort of zone of genius and doing what fulfills them, and they're in the right seat, they're getting that fulfillment, they're getting that reward, they're having that balance, they're challenged and curious, like that's going to be a healthy thing. But if, I grow it to $100 million company, which I really don't want to, and I'm taking, 3,000% profits, and everyone's kind of underpaid, right? How much is enough, right? Do you need $1 billion, or is $100 million enough? Do you even need $100 million, or is $10 million enough? So I it's just really a call to action to like, hey man, think about this stuff. What are you actually doing? How's that? And again, it's back to your reputation, right? What's this legacy you're creating for yourself? It reminds me of a book I read, and I don't remember what book it was, but it was right around the time I moved from Philly to Baltimore. And it talked about, what legacy are you creating for yourself? And it made me really think deeply, which I have a habit of doing. Like, why do people worry about their legacy when they're old? Why don't they care about it when they're young? And I believe that that's when I started to think about brand as reputation, was at that time. What do you want to be known as, right? If I died, tomorrow, what are people going to say about me? What are people going to say about my company? Like those things are important to me. Like, I don't give a shit what anyone thinks about me, but like, what's the legacy I'm leaving? And all that is inseparable from the actions we take as leaders of our company.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And that gets back to, that first point that you had about getting started with our brand, right? What are you willing to fight for? What fulfills you? And what are your values and purpose? And if we don't have that, right, we're just going to float around and do often work that doesn't fulfill us, doesn't give us meaning, and frankly, doesn't build our brand. Instead, it kind of detracts and makes us kind of floppy, right?
Yeah, it's what I call the poor positioning quagmire, right? So you don't have a clear purpose and positioning. So your marketing is very difficult to do anything, because who are you marketing to and what are you marketing to them? Like, we'll do whatever you want. Yeah, you want that? We'll do that. You want this? We'll do that, right? Like, how do you market that, right? So you have no positioning. How do you price accordingly? If you're not in demand, you're just selling what they want. So your pricing's low. You have no case studies because clients aren't happy because you don't really do what they asked you to do, but you did it for the paycheck. You did it for the transaction. So revenue's low. Your marketing's never going to work. So you stop marketing, right? And all this stuff leads to a business going under. It may not happen overnight, but it's going to happen over time, because like, this business has no foundation. It may have had one at one point, but it's been eroded by the desire for, quick sales, a spike in profits. But what's the price to pay for that? Right? The price to pay is that longevity, that sustainability of the company.
Wow. Lots to unpack, Bobby. So the book is a branding book that doesn't have any design in it, which I think is super cool and super different than stuff that I've read, man. So if you were going to give us like one more message, man, from the book or from your experience, or one more story that really resonates and would help people kind of get started on their brand building journey, what would that be, buddy?
I mean, really, like, my number one piece of advice to anybody is just keep it real, right? Like when your brand is real and authentic, when you as an individual are real and authentic, right? When you're your authentic self, you don't have any competition, right? Because who can compete with you on being you? So stick to what we have. There's this hedgehog concept that I learned about in Good to Great by Dan Collins, and I've latched onto it because I learned about it during the early days of the pandemic, and I looked at the pandemic as a recession through my business lens, and figuring out how to navigate and strategize through it. Obviously, it's so much bigger than that, but this is just through the business lens. And the hedgehog concept is really your Venn diagram of expertise. So, what are you on? And I use my terms. What are you uncommonly good at? What drives your economic engine? What are you fulfilled with? What's your purpose? What do you love to do? And they overlap, right? In that middle is where the hedgehog is. And what's the hedgehog concept? The hedgehog concept goes back to like Sparta. And there was like a parable or saying, I guess, that actually, did you know that Sparta exists at the same time as Confucius? These two societies at the same time. I learned that interesting tidbit. But the hedgehog, the fox knows many things. The hedgehog, one good thing. Meaning that the fox has to be wily and creative to eat and survive. And the hedgehog needs to know one thing. Roll up in a ball. Because when it rolls up in a ball, the fox can't eat it. Nothing can eat it, right? So it's all spiky. So your hedgehog concept is how you position your company, but also how you pivot it when you need to pivot. Because a company always needs to pivot, right? Like when an airplane goes on autopilot, it doesn't make a line A to B. It makes constant corrections, constant pivots to get you there, right? Because if it's 1 degree off over 1,000 kilometers, you're going to be way off, right? You're going to be a different continent. So when you think about your hedgehog concept and applying that to your business, your area of expertise, your radius of business that you operate in. There's a story. I doing that research. There's 2 brands, right? A story of 2 brands. One is Polaroid, right? Old heads like us remember Polaroid, Instamatic cameras. They looked at their brand as a product. Okay. So in the 80s, their brand was worth a couple $billion. I forget the whole numbers, the blogs on my website with the data. But by I think the year 1990, maybe 2000, 1990, they declared bankruptcy for the second time in less than a few years, and they liquidated all their assets. So they went from $1 billion company to nothing, gone, right? They're bought up by Fujifilm. They still exist, but it's not the same, right? They had the technology for digital cameras, was already out there, right? They refused to pivot because they said, our brand is our product. Now they're extinct. Old heads like us know of Nokia. Nokia was our first cell phone, right? And I miss that simplicity in a way. But Nokia started in, I think it was like the early 1900s. And they were in the UK. They were a mining technology communications company, right? Mining coal, for London. And over the years, they've evolved, and we know them as the first cell phones, but they still exist. And what they do is telecom infrastructure. So when these double-edged swords came out, they were like, we can't compete with that. So instead of saying like, we're going to double down on our product, instead they pivoted around their radius of expertise, their hedgehog concept, right? So that's what they've done over the years, because they didn't look at their brand as a product or a service. They looked at it as a philosophy, as values, as purpose, which has steered them to 2022 and beyond, where they still exist. These wouldn't work without Nokia. They do all the infrastructure. In fact, they're putting Wi-Fi on the moon. You can't get good Wi-Fi in the subway in Philly, but you're going to be able to get it on the moon thanks to Nokia. I digress, but that's the point of their business. They continue to thrive and flourish because they're not getting stuck on products and services and features and ingredients as their brand. Those are commodities. It's their purpose. It's their values. It's what their mission is. It's who they are at their core, is what their brand is, their reputation, right?
Yeah, right on. So start there, right? Figure out your values, figure out your purpose, and then be able to pivot around that. That's a good place to start, man, and a good place for us to end. So really cool, Bobby. So congrats. The book is going to come out in as very soon. So if you're listening to this, probably November of 22, you probably have the book out. It's Build Your Brand Like You Give a Shit. If you want to get to know Bobby G more, check out properagency.com, PROPR agency.com. And Bobby, where's your favorite place if people are going to reach out and touch you, man? Where would you like them to go? LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, or where do you hang out, man?
I got off all the social media except for LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's just my handle's that Bobby G, because one of a kind, right? So just hit me up there. Tell me where you came from. You heard this. I'd love to connect with you and catch up and talk some shit.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Bobby. Great stuff, man. Lots of stuff we can take away. Lots of ways we can get started, but start with your values and purpose. Great.